Hi there, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about building storefronts anywhere. At the end of my talk, I'm going to be doing a live Q&A. If you want to ask questions throughout my talk, open up the Unite app, go to the live Q&A section, and enter the code, which is on that slide there, and ask your questions. At the end of my presentation, I'll be answering questions you've submitted through the app and live questions from the audience. Let's talk about building storefronts anywhere. This isn't a new feature of Shopify. Our developer community has always been able to figure out how to embed Shopify products just about anywhere. And we've been building out different tools to help you do this over the last few years. Let's go over just a few of them. In the early days, before we had buy buttons, developers figured out ways to create weird theme templates containing clever JavaScript. They would pull these pages into their websites using iframes or script tags, extract data through post message or other clever means. This may not have been a common approach, but it was clever and an ingenious use of our theming engine, and it really showed us that there was a need for a better way. Eventually, we introduced the buy button. The buy button was, and is still, a great product. It lets you stick one or many products on a website, have a simulated shopping cart, and allow customers to proceed to a checkout. This was one of our first and longest-running first-party sales channels. It helped out a lot of developers and merchants cram a bit of Shopify into their existing blog or website without a whole lot of work. Last year at Unite, we introduced the JavaScript Buy SDK. It extracted all of the functionality of the buy button, but into a library. This library could be dropped into your existing front-end stack or into a Node application. This provided developers with a lot of flexibility that the buy button didn't really provide. We also gave you the mobile buy SDK, which had more features than the JavaScript SDK, but generally it filled the same gap and the same needs. However, this didn't get us all the way to where we wanted to be. All of these solutions had some pretty significant limitations. Liquid templates were an ingenious solution, but this isn't the sort of developer experience we want to build for. Clever hacks are a great way for us to see a need, but they're not a great way to support a developer ecosystem. This template as an API approach had some serious technical limitations. It could only read data. There was no way to create a checkout or manage a cart without bumping the customer back to the online store. The buy button, like I said before, is a great product, but starting out, it had some pretty serious performance limitations. Even after those were solved, there were still some issues. The buy button cart was a simulation. It didn't talk to any Shopify API. It only had locally calculated totals. It couldn't give you tax information. It had no access to cart scripts. It even lacked more basic features like giving you access to line item attributes. It still provided a way for the customer to go to the checkout, but these limitations affected a lot of our developers. JS Buy gave developers increased flexibility here, where the buy button had limited configuration options. JS Buy let the developer build whatever sort of UI they wanted to build. However, it still had the same technical and API limitations as the buy button. Mobile Buy lives in a similar space as JS Buy. Where we provided more features in Mobile Buy, such as customer accounts, we still had no cart API or really any sort of accurate representation of that. This is where we've been for the past year. At last Unite, we introduced the JavaScript Buy SDK. We gave you Mobile Buy v2. But with the limitations I've talked about, we weren't all the way there. This year, we're introducing something new. We're introducing the Storefront API. We've created a whole new cohesive API with the goal of solving all of these limitations of our previous solutions. And the best part is, we're taking all the libraries that you know and love and building them on top of this new API. So access to new features will only involve an upgrade. So what is the Storefront API? What does this represent? And in Shopify terminology, what is a storefront? The easiest way to describe this is with an analogy. If you look at a retail business, it's split into two parts, the back office and the storefront. In API terms, the back office is everything that exists under the /admin URL in our API. It represents a set of actions a merchant can perform within a shop. This means creating and editing products, managing orders, creating draft orders, editing discounts, all the stuff around managing their business. The storefront side of things is basically our online store. As an API, it's a set of actions a customer can perform within your shop. This means viewing products, building a cart, creating a checkout, paying for that checkout, and creating an order. The Storefront API gives you access to all of these resources and actions. So what does this all mean for you as partners and as developers? What does this enable? How does this affect merchants? This API enables you to build one-to-one sales channels. Where you can sell your products in a storefront off of Shopify. This may mean integrating Shopify into an existing web platform or into a mobile application. We're introducing the full set of features that are available through Shopify's online store for you to use wherever you need. Let's see how our new features stack up against the previous limitations. You get what you've had access to before, like products and collections. However, the data format is a little bit improved. You can actually pull down collections with their products now. In mobile buy and JS buy previously, we built out carts in the client. They were a completely local representation. Now we have API resources that represent your cart and provide you with shipping info, taxes, cart scripts, and everything you need to actually convey an accurate total to the customer. We've also added customer resources, so you can authenticate a customer. They can view their previous orders through the API, and you can use their data to pre-fill a checkout. Finally, we've added checkouts across the board as an API and integrated into both JS Buy and the Mobile Buy SDK. This may not be a new feature in Mobile Buy, but it doesn't normalize our feature set, and it separates the process of building up a checkout from the process of taking an actual payment. So how can you access this today? We've added an interface to the private app section. You can check the box that says, allow this app to access data from your storefront, and this will turn on the API. That private app will act as a sales channel, make sure you have products published to it, and the API will just work. Once you have a storefront access token, you're just ready to go. If you have the buy button installed, you can actually pull down JS Buy at the alpha tag, and that's also set up to work with the new GraphQL API. And that's another important part of this. It's built in GraphQL. This means the entire API is introspectable. You can ask the API to describe itself and all of its capabilities. You can also use off-the-shelf tools like Graphical to look through the entire schema and the sort of calls you can make, as well as the type of information and required fields for mutations. But GraphQL is still fairly new, and I imagine some of you don't fully understand what it's all about. So let's look at how it works. I'm going to help explain this using some technology that you probably all already know, which is REST. In a REST API, you send an HTTP verb to a URL. You maybe add some query parameters on there, and you maybe add some headers as well, and then some body text as part of the request. This conflates a lot of the intent to the server through a lot of different properties. GraphQL doesn't really care about the transport. You may still need some HTTP data, but it doesn't change between requests. It's effectively just configuration. It's not part of the intent you communicate with your server. GraphQL is a query language, agnostic of transport. You send query text to the server with an object graph describing the data you'd like to get back. The same is true for sending changes to the server, except those changes aren't queries. They're called mutations. You describe exactly what data you'd like to change and what you'd like to see from that reflected change. With GraphQL, you also get some cool side benefits. You can request an entire shop at once. With the query here, I'm grabbing the first 10 collections out of a shop, the first 3 products from each collection, all of their variants and primary images and prices. With this, I could render a pretty solid landing page with my first set of collections and a preview of the products in each of those collections. The equivalent in REST would be a network call to list out collections, a network call per collection to fetch the collection's products, and an additional network call to describe the shop itself. So what should you use as developers? Should you use the SDKs or the API directly? That's entirely up to you. We'll continue to support the JS Buy SDK. It wraps up the complexities of the new API in a familiar interface. We'll be releasing Mobile Buy version 3 shortly, which rides on top of the Storefront API. And as Atli and Satish touched on, we're releasing the Unity Buy SDK. So you have an easy path to build storefronts inside a game that you might be building in Unity. And if you're comfortable using GraphQL directly, you're free to skip our tooling and go straight to the API. Our goal here is to support a full spectrum of developers. We want these features to be accessible to people who know GraphQL inside and out, who can use off-the-shelf tools, as well as to developers that are new to this and want some of our tooling that abstracts the API. At this point, I'd like to show you one quick example of the Storefront API in use. I have a short video here, which should start up. Yeah. We're demonstrating a flow of loading products and a shop name, which is rendered at the top, adding those products to a cart, and moving over to a checkout. This example was put together using Ember.js and the JS Buy SDK. Once it's finished, adding a couple more things to the cart and moving over to the checkout, I'll talk a little bit about the code on the left there. In this sample, we're using the JS Buy SDK. It's kind of hard to see up here, but the left-hand pane of those two shows a couple of requests that are requesting product information and shop information to display this page. It's pretty terse. There's not a lot of code there. And in the pane beside it, there's the calls to the mutations to add those products to a cart. We built out the same example in a couple different variations. This code orchestrates the exact same user interface, but it's built using Apollo's GraphQL client for Ember. This loads up the shop in a single call, since it's a manual GraphQL query. Unlike in JS Buy, where we had to make 2 calls, this gives you a little bit more flexibility and performance savings using the raw GraphQL. The right pane shows the mutations, which are, again, longer, to create a second mutation and add products. And here's the same example again. This code is built using our own GraphQL client. It's very similar to Apollo's GraphQL client, except we're using a query builder interface. And you get the same performance gains as with Apollo, but there are some conveniences around building out relationships between objects and some pagination. If you'd like to see the full set of examples, which we've built out using React and Relay and Node.js and a few other things that access the Storefront API, go to this GitHub repository, github.com/Shopify/Storefront API examples, and you'll see all the different variations that you can use with the Storefront API. Additionally, we have documentation and resources around all of the SDKs at developers.shopify.com/custom storefront SDKs. And that's it. Moving on to the live Q&A, if anybody has any questions. OK. Does anybody have any questions? Just raise your hand, and we have a mic runner who can come out to you.
Hi.
Hi.
What's the main difference between the Storefront API and the Sales Channel API?
The Sales Channel API is more for orchestrating all sides of it. So it's the merchant side of building a sales channel and the storefront side of the sales channel, as well as some of the APIs and SDKs that help your app install into the shop. The Storefront API is a subset of this. It's really just the part that orchestrates customer interactions within your shop. So it's built for an untrusted domain, like in a mobile app or on a web page. Anybody else? Oh.
Hi. So right now you've shown an example when creating a private application. Is this going to be public, like in the public applications as well? Like.
Yeah. So if you're creating an app through the partner dashboard, once you can create sales channels apps through there, it'll be available. And we're also beefing up the private app interface. There was a screenshot of it before under custom storefronts, where you can turn this functionality on as well. Any other questions? Oh. What's the difference from importing data to database than to GraphQL? Well, with that, I hope I'm answering this question the way you're intending it. But with that, you would be using some sort of application, private or public, and you'd have to manage your own server to maintain that database and access it and proxy the calls from whatever your front end is into that database. With this, it's just our server. You don't actually need a server running anywhere to interact with our data. Are there any other questions?
I may have missed this, but when will the Sales Channel API be more broadly available? Has that been announced? My understanding is that it's not generally available for the sales channel API.
It's available to select partners, and it'll be launching through the partner dashboard soon. I think within the next month, probably. There's a mic runner.
Are all these features going to be available for all merchants or Plus or any other plans?
Or what was the first part? Or all the what?
The Plus, the Shopify Plus or anything, is it available to everybody?
This is available to everybody.
Okay.
You can go into any shop today and access it.
Okay.
All right, there's a couple more in the app. Will reorder capability be available with this? That's something you can implement. You can actually see customers' previous orders, and if you want to build the functionality to take that order and create a new checkout with it, that's something you could facilitate using this API. Will there be support for GraphQL for other Shopify APIs? That is a possibility in the future. However, we're not committed to any of that just yet. And how do existing apps interact with the Storefront API? If your existing apps are using the Mobile Buy SDK or JS Buy SDK, you can upgrade to Mobile Buy v3, which will be out next month, or you can hop on the JS Buy Alpha, which will be in like a production build very shortly. Are there any other questions out there? All right, if that's it, thanks a lot, everybody.